Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. This time it's an important update to yesterday's Valve story, serving both as a vital correction, an apology, and a further dive into a now significantly more interesting take on the Steam distribution agreement, which is absurdly loose to the point where many notable games pretty much are in violation of it, including Epic Store exclusives such as Metro Exodus and Shenmue 3. First though, our mistake. Yesterday's video was out a day late to the point of no longer being fully accurate. Here's what happened. It was written, reviewed, and recorded early on Monday, but we then had tech issues that pushed the edit back to the point where we decided to release it on Tuesday. In the intervening period, Sid Alpha released his follow-up video where people had got in contact with him showing the same Steam distribution agreement, but from an earlier date. As of the time of writing, just about everybody assumed that this whole thing had been a new change. However, through Sid Alpha's video, that was later revealed to be false. Our script by that stage had already passed review, so we did not think to recheck the story, even though it was going to be released the day after it was written. I had moved on to other projects, the research review had already taken place, we assumed it was accurate, and that was a mistake that resulted in an out-of-date video being published. Moving forward, if a video is delayed, we will, as a point of process, fully re-review it. We clearly cannot assume that we'll just bump into the update during the edit, so that now needs to be part of our formal process, and it is now a part of that process. So my apologies for that, and let us get into the story, which I now think is in a few ways a bit more interesting. So, it has came to light that Valve's long-standing Steam distribution agreement has a number of clauses in it that many games may be in violation of. Now, this really caught on initially because of the Epic Game Store angle, of course, and I will talk about that today, but there is a lot more to it. So, in the delivery clause, it locks developers and publishers into release parity. Since this has existed for a long time, already released Epic Game Store exclusives such as Metro Exodus are in violation of it. The same goes for Shenmue 3, which, while it has not released, does have a Steam page. Now, Epic have been such a pest in the past that many people are cheering on their failures, meaning that there is a hunger for Valve to enforce this clause. After all, it would just kind of feel good to see a spanner be thrown in Epic's works. But here's the problem with that. A parity agreement without compensation is a totally wild thing for a store to actually demand. It'd be messy as hell for games with varying release dates, hell, even games that launch, on a publisher's launcher and then on Steam, like say Smite, they'd be in trouble. Epic exclusives would be got, but technically so too would games released first on itch.io. This would also be tricky because sometimes exclusives can be okay. Take Sony, who fully fund development of new titles from scratch. Fundamentally, if Epic were to fund a studio to make a new game from the ground up, from scratch, and have that be an exclusive, I don't think people would mind that much. The real problem is that Epic are capitalizing on people's desire to play already announced games that people are hyped for, and then, late in the day, locking those games into exclusivity. Take Humble Originals, some of those couldn't go on Steam if this was enforced. And really, if it was enforced, it would be poor form indeed, because release parity is not a given. In most cases, agreeing to release parity will involve the developer or publisher getting some form of compensation, be that financial or in the form of exposure, such as being on a platform holder's E3 indie trailer. Much of that is, of course, why Valve are just clearly not enforcing this rule. In an interview with Game Daily, attorney Richard Hoeg said that provisions like this are rarely enforced, and that the negatives of doing so are greater than the benefits. As to why this is in the contract, well, he had this to say. One, because you never know when you might need to use it in the circumstance where you have to frame it as the other side being a bad actor, and two, because you can use it as leverage. By simply having the provision be in there, Steam can elect to press on another party for benefits, whether in the form of the next contract negotiation, next release, or otherwise. Overall, it's the type of thing that at first read may seem alarming, certainly in the context of Epic exclusives and then us thinking that it was a new addition, but in full context it is somewhat more clear. Now that said, Valve could determine that enforcement is worth the cost if they see Epic to be enough of a threat to their business. They've not done that yet though, and doing anything at Valve takes a lot of effort. Why? Well, let's have a look at some of the other clauses before we answer that question. So, there are a lot of stipulations in here. For an example, that there be no in-application stores. Now, the idea here is that all DLC should be ran through Steam, because that's how Steam gets its 30% cut on the DLC. But we all know that this is not fully enforced. Take Smite. You can purchase skins for that game inside the game client using gems. Now, I believe the purchasing of gems happens in a browser breakout window, so that could maybe get around that, but still, Still, there are a lot of titles at best skirting around this. Then for DLC, it stipulates the DLC must release on Steam at the same time that it does externally. Now that protects Steam account owners from getting a bad deal. That's something that, as we covered a while ago, actually happened with GOG in a few instances. But the thing here is that loads of Arrow games actually violate this by having their not safe for work DLCs be available off-site. Of course, they're DLCs that Valve probably wouldn't approve. Then it also says that you can do promotional content via other channels, distribution channels that is, but that there must be material parity between those users and Steam users who make comparable investments. Well, quite simply, sometimes that's just not the case. So what do we overall see here? Well, Valve clearly do not enforce these policies. As Richard Hoeg said earlier, these exist in case they need to be used, with them only being used in cases where the other party is acting in a way that's particularly damaging to Valve. Plus, it's Valve. This is something we need to take into account. It's Valve with their flat internal structure. They're just not a normal company in terms of how things get done there. For anything to happen inside Valve, there has to be significant will. Enough people need to care, then they need to form up, then they need to actually get going on doing something. Is this the type of thing that a lot of people inside Valve would be interested in? I don't really think so. I mean, Epic could impact their bottom line, yes, but we all know Valve's great disdain for getting their hands dirty. Their kind of libertarian-like approach boils down to them creating systems that handle themselves. I mean, why curate your store yourself when you can have an algorithm do it? It's like Spotify versus Apple Music. Apple touted human curated playlists as a feature, while Spotify relies on its discovery algorithm, the latter of which I find is far more useful for me. I think Valve generally have this stuff right, but there are always ways in which a system can fail or be exploited, and that's something we're all aware of with Valve's blunders. But really, thing is, when you look at them as a company, they've chosen to construct the core of their business around self-sustaining systems that don't require massive amounts of human oversight. And because of that, I just don't see them, rigidly enforcing these policies as being a likely thing. Even take QA, a part of their QA clause. I mean, there's games that release in such a buggy state that don't really seem to be industry standard, yet Valve clearly don't enforce that all the time. And really, this hands-off way of doing things, that's just Valve's MO, and I do think that extends to their internal decision-making, meaning that I just think that they would be less likely to get involved in the enforcement of these rules than many other storefronts if they were to have the similar rules. So that's the update here. Epic exclusives with Steam pages are definitely in violation of this Steam agreement. However, it's very unlikely that Valve will enforce it, and if they did, it would seriously break convention, as doing so would set a precedent for release parity being a thing. And, well, that's just not something that's normal. That's something that, if not given to a platform by a dev or publisher, is something where a platform is expected to compensate the dev or the publisher if that's what the platform holder wants. So it would be breaking convention there. So overall, I hope this video has clarified the situation and expanded upon it with more of their distribution agreement. So hopefully we've all came away from this understanding a little bit more than we did with yesterday's one. And again, I'm very sorry for the mistake that we made yesterday. As I said, we've updated our internal processes to counteract such mistakes in the future. And I mean, now I'd say most videos are going to go through a review of two people. So yeah, normally the way it depends who the writer is, if it's me, Adam, or Matt. But yeah, there's normally a two-person review. But if a video gets pushed back, in a case like with this video, we'll then do a another review on top of that. And that's basically how how we're trying to construct things so the mistakes like that do not happen again. So there you go. Thank you very much for listening to this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about these policies down below. There'll be another video up on the channel today, and with that, I will see you next time.